It's my pleasure to introduce our current Congressman, Mr. Mike Coffman.
Thank you so much. Thank you. First, I'm still your congressman until the end of the year. Actually, early in January. So let me just talk about a few issues that I'm working on. And I think in the Congress, the committees that we're on really defines a lot of the work that we do. And I'm subcommittee chairman on the Small Business Committee. And so small banks are paying for the sins of the big banks, and the regulatory burdens are so tough on them that they haven't been able to make the loans to the small businesses that we need to create the jobs to move this economy forward. And so I'm working on legislation right now that will bring that regulatory balance back to where it needs to be. I'm on the Natural Resources Committee, where we deal with public lands. And I'm working on legislation to expedite the permitting process for oil and gas development on public lands to allow Americans to develop American energy. Tomorrow I'll fly back to Washington, D.C. And next week we'll write a provision, an amendment on the defense authorization bill that says, we can't make cuts without compromising our national security, but we should not make any cut that does compromise our national security, as this administration wants us to do. I served in the 1st Armored Division in Europe, was my first assignment in the United States Army. The Cold War has been over with since 1989, yet we still have 80,000 troops in Europe. We're spending 4.7% of our economy on our defense. Our European allies are spending less than 2%. We can demonstrate our commitment to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization without maintaining permanent bases in Europe. I want to close those bases and bring our people home. Admiral Mike Mullen said before the Armed Services Committee, before he left, that the greatest threat to the United States is our national debt. He didn't say it was Al-Qaeda. He didn't say it was some foreign threat. He said the greatest threat to the United States is the decades of out-of-control spending by the Congress of the United States. I'm chairman of the Balanced Budget Amendment Caucus in the House of Representatives, and I will continue to do everything I can to move a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution forward to stop Congress from spending money that we don't have. And I also think that the Congress of the United States has to set the example. How else can we navigate our way through this debt crisis if we don't set the example first? And that's why I've introduced legislation to stop the system of automatic pay raises for Congress and end congressional pensions. And lastly, I think to change the culture of the Congress of the United States, I've introduced legislation to have mandatory term limits on every member of the Congress. Now, the Democrats targeted the 6th Congressional District in redistricting. And they took away the strongest Republican areas away from the district. The Elbert County being one of them. And a lot of Douglas County, Jefferson County, and they put the district way up north all through Aurora and much of Adams County. A district that Obama, in the new district, Obama won it by 8 points in 2008. It's going to be a tough race. After the Democrats invested all their resources in winning in court, they forgot to get a candidate. And so then at first they tried to recruit Andrew Romanoff, former Speaker of the House, and they polled in the district. And he deliberated on that, thought about it for 2 weeks, and then declined. Then they tried to get the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, to change running from the 4th Congressional District, Brandon Schaefer, to run against me in the 6th District. They polled again in the district. I wish they'd share those numbers with me. And then he thought about it for a week or two, and then he declined. And so they're left with the first candidate who announced before the lines were drawn, a Denver state representative by the name of McCloskey. I got to tell you, I love a fight. I can't wait. And I'm going to beat him. Now, I got to tell you, I'm so excited about, I feel bad about leaving you, but I'm very excited about who you're going to meet tonight. And in 2005, when the Marine Corps was a little desperate, they were shorthanded in Iraq, and they were telling people that were getting discharged, but had been even out for 2 years. They were ordering to come back, and to retirees, they asked people to volunteer, and I decided to do that. And I resigned from the Office of State Treasurer and volunteered to go back to the Marine Corps and go back to Iraq. And when I did that, a chain of events started, and I think your state senator, Mark Hillman, took my place in the state treasurer's office. I think Greg Brophy took Mark Hillman's place as your state senator here. And then Cory Gardner took Greg Brophy's place in the State House of Representatives. And he has such an American story. Growing up in Yuma, Colorado, a small farm town, family-owned business for about a century, a farm implement dealership out in Yuma, started by his great-grandfather. He worked there when he was growing up, then went off to college, went to law school, and then eventually found his way into Senator Allard's office and rose to be his legislative director. And I believe he met his beautiful wife, Jamie, who's where is she? There she is. Okay, met his beautiful wife, Jamie, over there too. And I just think that I've been, out of all the freshmen, and we have an enormous freshman class, I think the largest, I can't remember how many freshmen do we have? 87. But I got to tell you, the sharpest one, by far, is your next congressman, Cory Gardner. And let me just say this: he's got his daughter Allison, who's is it 8 years old, and so he brought his daughter Allison on the floor one day, and so I was kind of joking around with her, and a vote came up. And they allow children to come on the floor, not adults or not even teenagers. And so, but Allison was on the floor, and I said, "Allison, you got to help me here. I don't know what to do. And there's a vote up here. What do I do?" And so I was thinking, she would just be all flustered and everything. And so she just looks at me like, "Gosh, this guy's dumb." So she looks at me and she goes, "Well, what does it do? And does it cut spending?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, then vote for it." Unbelievable, and what a family, and the new 4-month-old son Thatcher, and but I tell you what, you will remember this night, I believe, because here's a guy I believe who's really going places in national politics, and I think you will reflect on this night and say, "This is the night that I met Cory Gardner." Cory, come on up here.
Thank you, Mike Coffman. Thank you. Elbert County, we're going to make sure that Mike Coffman remains in the United States Congress. When you go into the National Republican Congressional Committee office, there is a list of people who have done the most work to make sure that we retain a Republican Congress. At the top of that list is John Boehner. Second on that list, it's not Eric Cantor, it's not Kevin McCarthy, the other leaders. It is our very own Mike Coffman. So I want to thank you so much tonight for allowing me to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to meet so many of you for the first time this evening. And I do want to make sure that you have the opportunity to meet my family, Allison, who's up here in the front row, and my wife, Jamie, in the back. And she's heard me speak so many times that I told her tonight I'd had enough water that I may not be able to talk very long. And you know what she said to me? Keep drinking. So thanks for the support. But I am from Yuma, Colorado, a little tiny town out on the eastern plains. For those of you who don't know where it is, it's out between Eckley and Otis on the eastern plains. And we grew up in a farm equipment business, like Mike said. And it's about 100 years old. And you know, in the 1915, when the company started in the 1920s, we actually sold caskets. We sold caskets out of the same dealership that we sold tractors. And sometime in the 1930s, 1940s, we quit selling caskets. But the other day I told my dad, you know, we might want to start selling caskets again, because you tell somebody the price of farm equipment and you sell a casket. For those of you who don't know, I like to bring and make sure that Jamie and Allison and Thatcher have the opportunity to be on the campaign trail and be in the counties with me whenever I can and whenever we can make it work. It's an incredible opportunity for them to get to meet everybody, and I certainly love to have them by my side each and every chance I get. People often ask whether or not Allison is adjusting, you know, how she's doing, what's she thinking of it, whether or not things are going well with the travel schedule. And last week I was actually giving a speech on the House floor during special orders on energy issues. And I called Jamie up and I said, hey, in a couple hours I'm going to be on the House floor speaking, so go ahead and turn on C-SPAN so Allison can see it on the House floor. And so sure enough, 6 o'clock comes around and I'm on the House floor and Jamie says, hey Allison, there's Daddy. And she looks up at the TV and she says, yeah, can you change the channel? So you know, it's been an incredible experience over the past 2 years in the United States Congress. On January 5th of 2011, the 112th Congress was sworn into office. The next day, on January 6th, we took to the House floor, and for the very first time in our nation's history, we read the Constitution of the United States on the floor of the House of Representatives. Each one of us taking turns, Republicans and Democrats, taking turns to read the Constitution. But the most amazing thing when I knew Washington, D.C. was broken was when there was debate before the Constitution was read. When a Democrat got up and stood up and said, we weren't given any background information about today's reading. We weren't told which Constitution we were reading. I'm not kidding you. You can go to the archives of C-SPAN and see this debate. That's when I knew Washington, D.C. had problems. When I ran for Congress, I pledged to make sure that we would change the ways that Washington worked to end the status quo. And as the 112th Congress has started, I made clear my objectives: to focus on getting this country back to work, to reduce the size and strain of government, to cut spending, and to change how Washington works. Before Republicans took over the House in 2011, President Obama and the Democratic majority had increased discretionary spending by 25%. And the deficit grew larger than the combined deficits of George Washington to George H.W. Bush combined. President Obama funded the failed Solyndra, built a campaign on crony capitalism, and let the economy suffer even more under the weight of his failed policies. And one thing is crystal clear, Elbert County Republicans. I think we overestimated Barack Obama's ability to govern. With the Senate and the White House controlled by the Democrats, we haven't been able to accomplish everything that we set out to. But we have pulled the country to the right, and we are setting the stage for real change this November in 2012. This past year, we have stopped the liberal activism that characterized President Obama's first 2 years. We have reduced non-defense discretionary spending to 2008 levels. No more stimulus boondoggles, no more government takeovers of healthcare, no more too big to fail. And we have passed legislation to protect life. Since the beginning of the 112th Congress last year, your Republican majority has voted to cut our congressional budgets by 10%. And just in the way the House is operated, Just the way the House of Representatives is operated, we have saved $220 million. And tonight I am proud to announce that my office will be returning to the United States Treasury over $200,000 to reduce the deficit. But we've got a lot more work to do in order to halt the damage that Democrats have done to our economy. Last year, we laid out a path to prosperity, passing a budget that would grow our economy, stop the fiscal hemorrhaging. The budget cut $6 trillion in federal spending over the budget's first decade, and then it balances the budget and begins to pay down the debt in subsequent years. And you know what I call that? A good start. We've got a long ways to go to make sure that we continue progress. I believe that Washington's wasteful, out-of-control spending and the blatant disregard for the taxpayers' hard-earned dollars must stop so that we can get government out of the way and let America work. Our focus in the 112th Congress will continue to be on job creation and economic opportunity. Cutting spending and shrinking the size of government will create an economic environment that allows businesses to flourish and will lead to long-term job growth. And cutting spending is the only way that we will keep this country from backsliding into nations like Greece. To continue down the path of more debt, higher spending, spiraling inflation, that's not leadership. It's self-destruction. Republicans will not, we must not, we cannot aid and abet in the bankruptcy of our nation. Nor will we participate in the greatest act of generational theft that this nation, this world, has ever seen. We cannot pass these mistakes on to future generations. The other day, Allison was watching TV with my wife, Jamie, as the president was on television speaking about what was happening in the Middle East. The president said something to Jamie to the effect of, the president said on TV, if we are to remain free, when Allison said to Jamie, but we are free. To hear your 8-year-old daughter talk of freedom is an incredible moment. Yes, Allison, we are free, Jamie replied. But it took us a long time to get here. And now we in this room must fight to keep that freedom alive. That fight is indeed alive and well. It is alive and well right here in Elbert County as we prepare for the election of 2012. And it's been said here on the stage before, every year we hear this is the most important election of our lifetime. Why do we hear that? Because the stakes of each and every election are higher and more important. In 2008, voters around this country went to the ballot box and they made a decision. They voted out Republicans. They voted Republicans out of office because Republicans had failed to do what they had sent them there to do. In 2010, Americans around the country went to the ballot box and voted out Democrats because the Democrats had failed to do what America had sent them there to do. And now in 2012, these voters will go to the ballot box and make a decision. Did they like the election results of 2008 that brought the takeover of healthcare, Obamacare, stimulus spending, job-killing regulations? Or did they like the results of 2010, which brought a stop to too big to fail, an end to stimulus, and an end to regulations that cripple our economy? The decisions that each and every one of us will make this election will not only define our generation, but define the next 2, 3, 4 generations and beyond. And we will find out what kind of a nation we will be. Will we be the nation, the America that we love and cherish? Or will we be the America of Barack Obama? Because that is the choice, and that is what this election is about. It is about whether or not we will be Obama's America. In Obama's America, the president and his liberal allies wish to portray free enterprise as evil, as something that is out of date, out of order, and out of fashion. In Obama's America, society is split and divided along the lines of envy, that most dark of human nature. A country that doesn't encourage people to rise up and achieve, but one that takes from those who have excelled. In Obama's America, the government is the means to an end. It is a way to implement an agenda of social justice, a way to direct people to live their lives according to the way the government wants. It is an America that has forgotten that the Constitution is a red light limiting government power, not a green light giving it ultimate power. In Obama's America, there is no American exceptionalism. We are no better than Greece or France. We are only exceptional in the way that Greece or France is exceptional. In Obama's America, we are the problem. We, the people, are the problem. But you know what the very worst thing about Obama's America is? It's that we're even using that term, that we're even implying and using that phrase, the divisiveness that phrase conjures up. Because this is not Obama's America. This is all of our America. This is the United States of America, one nation under God. A nation that was founded on the principles that government doesn't guarantee success, but guarantees the opportunity to succeed. A nation that was built on rising up, not rolling over. A nation built on responsibility and not redistribution. This election is the election for all America, for 100% of America, with liberty and justice for all. What kind of a country have we become when success is shamed? We can. We will. We must change this November. How many of you remember the Concord Bridge from your history books? In Massachusetts on April 19th, 1775, a single shot was fired across that bridge to keep the British from taking munitions. That singular shot transformed itself into the birth of a nation. And now, as America finds itself in great need of leadership, there are signs of modern-day Concord Bridge heroics. Victories by Scott Brown, Chris Christie, Governor McDonnell in Virginia called into focus the historic turning point that we have seen in elections the past 3 years. We've watched as Governor Walker of Wisconsin fought back against special interests and unions that threatened the solvency of his state. He did it in the face of the Obama political machine, the Democratic National Committee, labor union fat cats, and the liberal media cheering them on. The people of this great country spoke through their vote this past year, this past election. And now their representatives that they have sent to Washington are rising up to challenge the status quo. But not with bullets and bayonets, but with ballots and tea parties and an invigorated love for our Constitution. The actions of victory in Virginia, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and now Wisconsin has sent a strong message to Washington, D.C., and to the liberal media that the era of arrogance is over. And so this becomes our modern day call to arms, our challenge. Learning from the mistakes of the past, we must recapture the hopes and dreams of America, rekindle the spirit that our country has lost, and rebuild the pillars of a free society. Limited government, individual responsibility, free enterprise. Tonight in Elbert County, our fight for freedom moves forward. President John Adams often wondered if future generations of Americans would deserve the sacrifice and freedom that they had been given. Today, our country faces a fiscal crisis that threatens the very backbone of our nation. Entitlement programs continue to grow, government hiring continues to increase, and spending continues unchecked. And every day, politicians in Washington push legislation and bureaucratic regulations geared more toward designing society than defending liberty. Election after election, we see our fundamental liberties ceded to a Washington that is more interested in self-empowerment. States' rights are abandoned for the sake of national interests. And more often than not, principles that stirred electoral victory are dropped for momentary power. This past year marks what would have been the 100th birthday of President Ronald Reagan, an occasion that was marked by celebration around this country and around the world. Over the past decade, the legacy of Ronald Reagan has grown, and over the next decade, I'm sure it will continue to grow even more. Someone once replied when asked why he admired Ronald Reagan so much, he said, "I didn't know Ronald Reagan, but President Reagan knew me." I didn't know President Reagan either, but the other day, when I was flying back to Colorado, I stopped at the bookstore at the airport, and I picked up a book on the life of Ronald Reagan. And I sat on the airplane, and as I was reading it about his alcoholic father, life growing up in a home with an alcoholic father, his time working for GE, his time as an actor, governor of California, I realized that I had a tear coming to my eye. And it was one of those moments when you realize that you're on an airplane and you wonder if everybody else is staring at you as you're reading pretty intently. One of the last communications that we heard from President Reagan was in his letter to America in 1994 when he revealed that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. In classic Reagan speech, he said at the end of his letter, "In closing, let me thank you, the American people, for giving me the great honor to serve as your president. When the Lord calls me home, whenever that may be, I will leave with the greatest love for this country of ours and eternal optimism for its future. I now begin the journey that will lead me into the sunset of my life. I know that for America, there will always be a brighter dawn ahead." That moment, I thought back to his birthday. I thought back to the funeral ceremonies when he passed away. Remember the airplane Air Force One on its last voyage to Simi Valley, California, as it flew across the country, tipping its wing over his hometown in Illinois. The thousands of people that lined the streets. The thousands of people who came to see his casket lying in state in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. And I realized what it was then that brought that tear to my eye, because I began to wonder if the freedom that Ronald Reagan cherished, the notion that individual freedom and personal responsibility, that liberty beats government oppression each and every time, will truly carry the day. Or will central government grow, socializing the last bastions of the free market? I wondered if the legacy of Ronald Reagan will be remembered as a bright flash of light at the dusk of American history. Or will it be the light in the dark that shines into a brighter dawn? I believe that light will always prevail over darkness, and that indeed Reagan's legacy will be one in which we look back and say to our children and grandchildren, "He was right, you know. He believed in America when no one else did, and we are free because of him." Yes, President Adams, to answer your question, every generation of Americans deserves the sacrifice and freedom, the liberty, guaranteed by our Constitution and granted to us by our Creator. But the question is, will we do what is necessary to keep it? Shortly after I was elected, I attended a first freshman orientation. Many of you have been to the Capitol and you've been into Statuary Hall, that great ornate room with pillars and patriot leaders of our country lining the chamber. It's the building, it's the room that once served as the House of Representatives 100 years ago. And the chaplain of the House stood up to give the prayer for the evening's dinner. And as he stood up, he spoke quietly, lifting his arm, saying, "There's the place where Abraham Lincoln sat at his desk. In the corner is where John Quincy Adams sat. And here is where Henry Clay gave the impassioned speeches of his time. And tonight, we once again gather in this room in search of a more perfect union." I will never forget those words as we debate the future of our country and we continue our search for a more perfect union 236 years later. Later that night, as I was walking out of the room, a gentleman came up to me and whispered, "Listen to the echoes in the wall. You are not here to be a part of history. You are here to make history." I looked up at that great chandelier as he finished, and when I looked back at him, he had walked off. He was gone. Our nation faces its greatest challenges ever. And Elbert County, we in this room must make history. Each and every one of us has an obligation to past and future generations to uphold the promise of liberty. And we cannot do that sitting back. Across this country, the same party that wishes to tax our health care protests to keep theirs for free. In Wisconsin, teachers claim to be sick while thousands of their students sat in classrooms waiting to be taught. And while budgets must be trimmed, special interests argue, don't cut here. Elbert County, it is time that we stand up once again for our country, sending letters to the editor urging public action, marching on the Capitol when legislation strikes at the very heart of our freedom, teaching our children and our neighbors that now is not the time to play politics, but to find solutions. It is our time to elect a president who wants to restore the greatness of our nation and not redefine it. Each and every one of us must ask ourselves tonight why we're here. You came here not because of a great dinner, which it was, not because of a great party, which it is, not because of Republicans or Democrats, but because every single one of us believes in America, in doing something truly great to save this country, in building a country even better tomorrow than we are today. We are here tonight because we believe our nation is still worth fighting for. As members of Congress, I knew that we were able to put academy boards together to nominate young men and women to our nation's military academies. But what I didn't realize is that we had the incredible honor of calling those young men and women up to be the first to let them know that they had been appointed to the academy. And I'll never forget the first young man that I called to let him know that he had been appointed. It was a young man named Reed in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I called him up to let him know that he'd been appointed to West Point. And I got his mom on the phone and I said, "Hi, this is Congressman Cory Gardner. Is your son Reed there?" And she says, "Why is the congressman calling my son?" So I thought, all right, I can do better than that. Can you keep a secret? To which she said, "Why does the congressman want me to keep a secret?" So I said, "Look, I just wanted to be the first to let you know that your son Reed has been offered a fully qualified appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point." And she started to cry. She cried and she said, this is the only thing my son has ever wanted to do." Reed got on the phone and you could see that smile 2,000 miles away from Colorado to Washington, D.C. That young man believes this country is worth fighting for. Every man and woman who's rose in this room tonight, who served in our armed forces, believes that this country is worth fighting for. Every single one of the stars in the blue field of that flag represent blood that was lost on battlefields for this country because they believe in America. The fate of our nation is up to us. It is our time, our obligation to make history, to give back to a nation that has given so much to us, to lift this nation up and to ensure that the greatest nation on the face of this earth becomes even greater. Elbert County, let's get to work and make history. Thank you for the honor of being here tonight.